What if intelligence is not what you were taught to admire, but what you were trained to ignore? You live in a world that celebrates speed, noise, and reaction. Yet the most decisive minds move in silence, unseen, unchallenged. Today, you are about to confront a disturbing question. Not how smart you are, but where you truly stand. There are 7 levels of intelligence, and most people never rise beyond the first without even realizing it. Inspired by Machiavellian insight, this journey is not about vanity or labels, but about power, perception, and inner clarity. As you listen, parts of yourself may feel exposed, even uncomfortable, and that is the point. If something resonates, comment the phrase, "I see the pattern," to mark this moment of awareness. Like the video, subscribe, and stay until the end, because the final truth is one few are ready to face, yet it changes everything. Long before intelligence was reduced to tests, scores, and credentials, thinkers understood it as a hierarchy of perception. In ancient courts, monasteries, and battlefields, intelligence meant the ability to read forces beneath appearances, to see motives before words, and consequences before actions. Machiavellian thought did not invent this vision. It named it bluntly. Intelligence was never equal among men, not because of birth alone, but because most people remain trapped in reaction, imitation, and fear. Over time, modern society flattened intelligence into something measurable and harmless, because true discernment threatens systems built on obedience and distraction. You live in an era wounded by overstimulation, where depth is replaced by opinion and wisdom by noise. These levels were forgotten not by accident, but because a population disconnected from inner hierarchy is easier to guide, easier to provoke, and easier to control. The first level of intelligence is reactive intelligence, and this is where the majority of humanity remains trapped without ever questioning it. At this level, you do not truly think, you respond. Your emotions decide before your mind arrives. Anger feels like strength, outrage feels like clarity, and certainty feels like truth, but all of it is borrowed from the outside. Words, tones, provocations, praise, and humiliation pull invisible strings inside you. When someone disrespects you, you must answer. When someone challenges you, you must defend. When something frightens you, you must escape or attack. This level is exhausting because your inner world is never yours. You may be intelligent by social standards, articulate, educated, even admired, yet internally you are governed. Reactive intelligence is the most common form because it is rewarded early. As a child, reacting quickly earns attention. As an adult, reacting loudly earns validation. But here is the unsettling truth. Whoever controls your reactions controls you. At this level, life feels personal, chaotic, unfair, because everything feels like it is happening to you. You are inside the storm, not above it, and you mistake intensity for depth. The second level of intelligence is adaptive intelligence. This is where awareness begins, but power is still limited. Here, you start to notice patterns. You recognize that certain behaviors lead to predictable outcomes. You learn how to adjust yourself to environments, to people, to expectations. You become socially intelligent, emotionally flexible, capable of fitting in or standing out when needed. You read the room. You soften your words. You manage impressions. This level creates survivors. People who reach it often believe they are awake because they no longer collide blindly with the world. Yet adaptation is still a form of submission. You are not choosing the game, you are learning how to play it better. You shape yourself to avoid pain and gain advantage, but your core still bends. You may succeed, but quietly feel hollow. You may win approval, yet feel unseen. Adaptive intelligence is clever, but cautious. It avoids confrontation, not because it is wise, but because it fears loss. You are no longer ruled by raw emotion, but you are still ruled by circumstance. The third level of intelligence is strategic intelligence, and here the shift becomes dangerous to the status quo. This is the point where you stop asking how to respond and start asking why things unfold as they do. You begin to think in sequences rather than moments. You observe how people position themselves, how narratives are constructed, how power flows subtly through silence, timing, and absence. You realize that most conflicts are not accidents, but outcomes. At this level, you stop reacting immediately. You pause. You let others reveal themselves while you remain unreadable. Strategic intelligence understands that visibility is a cost, not a reward. You speak less, but your words carry weight. You act less, but your actions change trajectories. This level is uncomfortable because it requires restraint, and restraint feels like weakness to those still trapped below. You may be misunderstood. You may be accused of coldness or arrogance. In reality, you are learning the discipline of delayed expression. You are no longer inside the storm. You are watching it form. The fourth level of intelligence is psychological intelligence, and this is where most illusions collapse. At this stage, you stop seeing people as they present themselves and start seeing them as they are structured internally. You recognize insecurities behind aggression, hunger behind generosity, fear behind morality. You understand that words are rarely about truth and almost always about protection or control. This level can feel isolating, because once you see psychological mechanisms, you cannot unsee them. Compliments sound like leverage. Victimhood sounds like strategy. Confidence reveals fragility. You begin to realize that many relationships are unconscious negotiations. This intelligence gives you leverage, but it also gives you responsibility. Used unconsciously, it turns into manipulation. Used consciously, it becomes discernment. Here, the ego faces its first real test. You must choose whether to dominate others or to master yourself. Many fail here, intoxicated by insight, mistaking understanding for superiority. True psychological intelligence is quiet. It listens more than it speaks. It intervenes only when necessary. The fifth level of intelligence is existential intelligence, and few are willing to enter it because it dismantles identity itself. At this level, you begin to question not only others, but your own motives, beliefs, and desires. You ask why you want what you want. You examine the narratives you inherited, the ambitions you never chose, the fears you normalized. You realize that much of your life has been lived on autopilot, chasing symbols instead of meaning. This level brings discomfort, even grief, because it exposes the gap between who you are and who you perform as. Existential intelligence does not give quick answers. It deepens questions. You begin to sense that success without alignment is another form of failure. Power without purpose feels empty. You stop measuring life only by external wins and start measuring it by inner coherence. This level is rare because it requires courage to stand alone without borrowed identities. The sixth level of intelligence is sovereign intelligence. Here, you are no longer pulled by validation, fear, or comparison. You know who you are, not because you defined it loudly, but because you confronted yourself honestly. You choose your battles. You choose your silences. You choose your pace. You no longer need to dominate because you are not seeking proof. Your presence alone shifts dynamics. People feel it, though they cannot explain it. This level integrates strategy, psychology, and meaning into a unified inner authority. You act from principle, not impulse. From clarity, not reaction. Sovereign intelligence is not common because it cannot be taught quickly. It is forged through restraint, reflection, and loss. At this level, you are no longer playing roles. You are embodying alignment. The seventh level of intelligence will remain unnamed for now, not because it is mysterious, but because naming it too early would distort it. It is not something you claim, but something that emerges when all other levels are integrated and transcended. It is where intelligence becomes presence, where thought dissolves into perception, and where power no longer needs movement. This level cannot be rushed, imitated, or displayed. And this is where the most dangerous misunderstanding lies. Many believe they are at this level because they feel detached, superior, or indifferent. In truth, detachment without compassion is avoidance, and indifference without awareness is numbness. The final level demands more than insight. It demands inner truth. As you listen, notice where you felt resistance, where you felt recognition, and where you felt discomfort. Those reactions are not random. They are signals. The question is no longer which level sounds impressive. The question is where you actually live, moment to moment, when no one is watching. Now we descend where intelligence stops being a tool for navigating the world and becomes a mirror that exposes what you have been hiding from yourself. Because the higher levels are not built by accumulation, they are built by subtraction. Illusions fall away, masks crack, and the ego, which served you well in lower stages, becomes your greatest obstacle. This is where most people retreat without admitting it, because the mind prefers complexity over honesty. It prefers concepts over confrontation. But intelligence, at its highest levels, is not about knowing more. It is about lying less. At this stage, you begin to see one of the great modern illusions, the belief that self-expression equals freedom. You were told that saying everything you feel makes you authentic, that broadcasting your thoughts makes you powerful, that visibility makes you real. In truth, uncontrolled expression is often a sign of inner fragmentation. The need to be seen is rarely about truth. It is about reassurance. You notice that those who speak the most often know the least about themselves. They are drowning out silence because silence would force them to listen. Advanced intelligence understands that not every truth needs a voice, and not every emotion deserves an outlet. Discernment replaces discharge. You start to feel the difference between impulse and intention, and once you feel it, you cannot confuse them again. Here, another paradox appears. The more you understand human behavior, the less impressed you are by it. Status games reveal themselves as rituals of insecurity. Moral posturing exposes hidden aggression. Victimhood becomes a currency. You see how people unconsciously recreate the same emotional dramas, not because they want pain, but because pain feels familiar. This is where compassion must be integrated, or intelligence becomes cruelty. Without compassion, perception turns into contempt. With compassion, it turns into clarity. You realize that most people are not malicious. They are unfinished. They act from wounds they never examined. They defend identities they never chose. Seeing this does not make you superior. It makes you careful. The ego resists this stage fiercely because it survives by comparison. It wants hierarchy, labels, rankings. It wants to know where it stands relative to others. But higher intelligence dissolves comparison. You stop asking whether you are ahead or behind, smarter or duller. You ask whether you are aligned or fragmented, awake or distracted. The ego also loves certainty. Yet this stage introduces a deeper humility. You realize how much of what you believed was provisional, contextual, incomplete. Not wrong, but partial. This humility is not weakness, it is stability. A rigid mind shatters under pressure. A flexible one absorbs shock. You also begin to understand the hidden cost of desire, Not desire itself, but unconscious desire. Wanting approval ties your nervous system to others. Wanting control ties your peace to outcomes. Wanting recognition ties your worth to external mirrors. Advanced intelligence does not eliminate desire, it purifies it. You learn to ask not just what you want, but what that want is costing you internally. Is it stealing your attention? Is it compromising your values? Is it fragmenting your time? This level teaches you that freedom is not getting everything you want, but wanting fewer things with greater clarity. Another illusion collapses here, the idea that intelligence is always visible. In reality, the most advanced minds often look unremarkable from the outside. They do not argue excessively. They do not advertise insight. They do not rush to correct others. They understand that being right publicly often costs more than being silent privately. They allow others to misunderstand them because their sense of self is no longer fragile. This is profoundly threatening to a culture addicted to reaction and validation. Silence becomes a signal. Stillness becomes influence. You start to see that presence alters rooms more reliably than opinions. At this level, time itself is perceived differently. You stop living only in urgency. You think in arcs rather than moments. You accept delay. You allow things to ripen. You understand that premature action is often a form of fear. This does not make you passive. It makes you precise. When you act, it is because the moment is right, not because your emotions demand relief. This precision feels unnatural at first, because you were conditioned to equate speed with intelligence. In truth, slowness with clarity outperforms speed with confusion every time. You also confront one of the most uncomfortable truths. Intelligence does not make you immune to self-deception. In fact, it can make you more skilled at it. A sharp mind can build elegant justifications for cowardice, avoidance, and indulgence. This is why higher intelligence demands ruthless self-honesty. You learn to question your own narratives. Are you calling it patience when it is fear? Are you calling it independence when it is avoidance? Are you calling it acceptance when it is resignation? This internal interrogation is not self-attack. It is self-respect. You refuse to insult your own awareness with comforting lies. As this continues, identity loosens. You no longer define yourself solely by roles, beliefs, or achievements. You see them as expressions, not essences. Useful, but temporary. This creates a quiet inner freedom. Criticism loses its sting. Praise loses its grip. Failure loses its drama. Success loses its intoxication. You are present without being performative, engaged without being attached. This is often misunderstood by others as detachment or coldness. In reality, it is emotional sovereignty. You feel deeply, but you are not ruled by what you feel. This is also where you recognize the final trap, the spiritualized ego. The belief that awareness itself makes you special, that seeing illusions places you above them. This is the most subtle and dangerous illusion of all, because it disguises superiority as wisdom. True intelligence dissolves superiority. It knows that insight does not make you chosen, it makes you responsible. Responsible for how you speak, how you influence, how you restrain yourself. Responsibility replaces dominance. Precision replaces force. You begin to sense the unnamed level more clearly here, not as a destination, but as a way of being. It is not about control, but coherence. Not about knowledge, but presence. Thought becomes a tool rather than a master. Silence becomes fertile rather than empty. You are not chasing meaning, you are inhabiting it. This does not make life easier, it makes it clearer. And clarity is demanding, because it removes excuses. The real question now is no longer how intelligent you are, but how much truth you can tolerate about yourself. Because every level above demands something in return: comfort, validation, certainty, identity. Most people unconsciously choose to stay where the cost is lowest, not where the truth is highest. And that choice, repeated daily, determines not just how you think, but who you become. Notice what this part stirred in you. Resistance means a boundary was touched. Calm recognition means alignment. Confusion means a transition is forming. None of these are accidents. They are indicators. And they are preparing you for the most important question of all. What do you do with this awareness once you leave the safety of listening and return to the discipline of living? Understanding the levels of intelligence means nothing if your daily life remains unchanged, because awareness without embodiment quickly turns into another form of self-deception. The real work begins when you translate insight into discipline. The first practice is radical pause. Several times a day, especially when emotion rises, you train yourself to delay reaction. Not suppression, not denial, but delay. When anger, excitement, fear, or the urge to explain yourself appears, you do nothing for a few breaths. This pause rewires your nervous system. It breaks the automatic loop between stimulus and response. Over time, you will notice that many impulses dissolve on their own when not immediately obeyed. This single habit alone can move you from reactive intelligence towards strategic clarity, because you are no longer predictable to others or enslaved by your own emotions. The second practice is pattern journaling. At the end of each day, you write not what happened, but what repeated. The same type of conflict, the same emotional trigger, the same internal dialogue. You begin to map your psychological loops. Where do you over-explain? Where do you seek validation? Where do you withdraw? This is not for judgment, it is for exposure. Patterns lose power once named. This practice strengthens psychological intelligence by shifting your focus from events to structures. You stop seeing life as random and start seeing it as patterned feedback. Over weeks, you will realize that most of your struggles are variations of a few recurring themes. And once you see the theme, you gain choice. The third practice is selective silence. You consciously reduce unnecessary explanation, defense, and disclosure. Not to appear mysterious, but to reclaim inner authority. You notice how often you speak to be understood, liked, or validated. Then you choose silence instead. Silence is uncomfortable at first, because it removes the crutch of reassurance. But silence forces presence. It forces you to tolerate ambiguity. This practice strengthens strategic and sovereign intelligence. You will notice that when you speak less, others reveal more. Conversations shift. Power dynamics subtly change. You begin to experience that words are not your primary tool. Presence is. The fourth practice is desire interrogation. Once a week, you choose one strong desire or frustration and ask 3 questions. What do I want? Why do I want it? What am I afraid will happen if I do not get it? This exposes hidden attachments. Many desires are not about the object itself, but about avoiding discomfort, insignificance, or loss of control. This practice deepens existential intelligence because it forces you to confront the emotional economy of your life. You begin to distinguish between desires that align with your values and desires that simply anesthetize discomfort. Over time, your wants become fewer, but clearer, and clarity creates peace. The fifth practice is voluntary discomfort. Modern life trains you to avoid discomfort at all costs, yet intelligence grows through controlled exposure to it. You choose small, deliberate challenges. Physical discipline, intellectual effort, emotional honesty, solitude without distraction, not punishment, but training. Discomfort teaches you that you can remain calm without immediate relief. This builds emotional sovereignty. When you stop fearing discomfort, Manipulation loses its grip on you. Because most manipulation operates through fear of pain or loss, you become harder to push, rush, or provoke. The sixth practice is perspective shifting. When faced with a conflict or decision, you force yourself to see it from three positions: your own, the other person's, and an outside observer with no emotional investment. This interrupts egocentric narratives. It trains humility without self-erasure. You realize how partial your viewpoint often is, even when it feels justified. This practice strengthens advanced psychological intelligence and prevents the trap of moral superiority. Understanding does not excuse behavior, but it dissolves unnecessary hostility. The seventh practice is identity loosening. You regularly question the labels you use to define yourself: strong, smart, independent, kind, successful. You ask how these identities serve you and how they confine you. Identity is useful until it becomes rigid. When rigid, it demands constant defense. This practice prevents stagnation at higher levels, where people often become attached to being seen as aware or evolved. You learn to act from values rather than from image. Criticism becomes information rather than threat. Praise becomes feedback rather than fuel. The eighth practice is intentional withdrawal from noise. You create periods without constant input. No scrolling, no background sound, no consumption. Silence is not emptiness. It is space for perception. At first, restlessness arises. Then clarity follows. This practice reconnects you with the unnamed level, where intelligence becomes presence rather than analysis. You begin to sense your own thoughts instead of being flooded by borrowed ones. This is essential because a mind saturated with noise cannot perceive subtle truth. Common obstacles will appear. You may feel isolated as you change. Others may react defensively when your behavior shifts. You may doubt yourself when old habits resurface. This is normal. Growth is not linear. Regression does not mean failure, it means exposure. Each time you notice yourself slipping into reaction, justification, or attachment, you have an opportunity to practice again. The work is not to be perfect, but to be aware sooner each time. Above all, remember this: intelligence is not proven in moments of strength, but in moments of vulnerability. When you choose clarity over comfort, when you choose restraint over reaction, when you choose truth over ego, this is how intelligence stops being something you possess and becomes something you live. And once it is lived, it cannot be taken from you. You have now walked through a map most people never see, not because it is hidden, but because it demands something they are unwilling to give: honest attention. The 7 levels of intelligence are not ranks to collect or titles to display. They are mirrors. They reveal how you move through the world when no one is watching, how you react under pressure, how you relate to power, desire, silence, and truth. Reactive intelligence keeps you busy. Adaptive intelligence keeps you safe. Strategic intelligence gives you leverage. Psychological intelligence gives you insight. Existential intelligence strips away illusion. Sovereign intelligence restores inner authority. And beyond all of them lies a state that cannot be claimed, only embodied, where intelligence becomes presence rather than performance. What matters is not which level impressed you, but which one exposed you. Discomfort is a signal. Resistance is a message. Calm recognition is a confirmation. None of what you heard was meant to flatter you. It was meant to clarify you, because clarity changes how you speak, how you choose, how you walk away, and how you stay. The world does not need louder minds, it needs steadier ones. If this reflection revealed something real about where you stand, acknowledge it. Write the phrase you commented earlier again, or add a new one that feels true now. Like the video if this challenged you rather than entertained you. Subscribe if you want to continue exploring what most people avoid. And take this final question with you, not as a conclusion, but as a practice. When the noise fades, the roles dissolve, and no one is watching. Which level do you actually live from? And what would change if you chose differently? Starting today.